Well, good morning. This is Ian R. Crane, and it's the morning of Thursday, 21st of June, 2018, and the longest day of the year. Some call it Midsummer's Day. I rather refer to it as the first day of summer. At least that way I've got 3 months of decent weather to look forward to, hopefully. Well, it is a beautiful morning, actually. There's a bit of a crisp bite at the moment to the wind up here on the southeastern edge of Dartmoor. I've got a beautiful view out across to the English Channel and Hay Tor up behind me. And of course, this is the landscape that we associate with Britain. You know, the beautiful countryside that we can come out to get away from the madness and insanity of the cities. And yet we have a government and an industry, the unconventional gas industry, that seems determined to take this away from us and to destroy it, just like the industry has pretty much everywhere where it's established a footprint in the US, in Canada, in Australia, and elsewhere. Well, of course, it's not going all the industry's way, and you know, we are now well into the 6th year since the moratorium was lifted in December 2012, and still no frack in the UK, and hopefully that's the way it's going to remain. And a couple of days ago, INEOS got dealt a bit of a blow in the Scottish courts, bit of a masterstroke by the Scottish government and the Procurator Fiscal, because INEOS were trying to sue the Scottish government for denying them, or Jim Ratcliffe, their human right to be able to frack. Yeah, I know that sounds really perverse, doesn't it? Well, it is, of course, perverse, but what do you expect from an arch sociopath? Well, the Scottish government handled it brilliantly, because they argued that basically, how could you sue the Scottish government for banning fracking when there is no ban? Well, you know, this might, of course, not reflect particularly well on Nicola Sturgeon, but in reality, the Scottish government have stated categorically that there is no support for fracking. And, you know, in fact, I think it was Paul Wheelhouse, the Scottish Energy Minister, who last October said the Scottish government has stated that, that it will not support unconventional gas exploitation. So that may not necessarily be a definitive ban in words of one syllable, but it's an effective ban. And of course, the anti-fracking community in Scotland will keep pushing for the ban to be formalised. Well, in fact, it wasn't just INEOS, of course, in the courts. It was INEOS and Reach. And it is Reach that effectively hold the licence that sits to the northeast of Glasgow, pretty much centred on Cumbernauld. And this licence effectively expires at the end of this month. Now, you know, obviously there are calls in Scotland for the Scottish government to close that licence down at the end of the month and say, that's it, done, dusted. You didn't drill, you didn't fulfil the obligations of the licence, so that's it, it's over. And there are already elements within the Scottish government saying, well, it's not our decision to make, you know, it's Westminster. No, it's not. Since February of this year, it has been the responsibility of the Scottish government. So this is the opportunity for the Scottish government to demonstrate its absolute conviction to prevent the central belt of Scotland from being fracked by effectively shutting down and repealing that pedal. That, of course, then leaves INEOS, and no doubt that's going to be a bit of an ongoing battle. And, of course, meanwhile, INEOS are also looking to take the National Trust to court in England. And right now, of course, they're engaged in the public inquiry, which is being held at Chesterfield Library. And today is the 3rd day of that. So if you want to keep an update on what's going on there, then do subscribe to the Drill or Drop website. That's drillordrop.com, and you can get updates through the day as to how that inquiry is unfolding. And of course, you can witness the magnitude of cognitive dissonance by the INEOS representatives, where, of course, anything that doesn't actually support their case is denied and or dismissed as an irrelevance. Well, you know, the report, the Royal Society report, which was produced, what, almost exactly 6 years ago now, has, you know, fallen, how shall I say, I'm not into disrepute so much as an irrelevance. So, fortunately, the government has decided that it's time to get an update on that and to look at the new evidence that has come to light since that report was published. And Ruth Hayhurst, who I've just referred to as the proprietor of Drill or Drop, she asked the Royal Society for a comment on the fact that the government has commissioned a Welsh academic, actually. It's Professor... Oh, name slips my mind a second. I'm going to have to look it up. Professor Hewell Thomas. Good old Welsh name there. Professor Hewell Thomas. And he did sit on the commission that put together the Royal Society report. But the Royal Society gave a very interesting comment. And they said the academics wish to determine to what extent research into shale gas exploitation and extraction has developed since 2012, and will produce a report considering the quality and relevance of this research and any further needs based on this evidence. Now, that's a very interesting comment. The quality and relevance. So in other words, I mean, you can already predict what's going to happen here, can't you? That anything that doesn't actually support the agenda will be regarded as an irrelevance, and anything that does will be regarded as absolute state-of-the-art research and therefore has to be followed. So, you know, the fact is that we have yet another report coming up, which of course we can dissect. But meanwhile, of course, the reality is that Greg Clark should refuse to sign off on any application to frack until that report has been produced and analysed and dissected. So consequently, any suggestion that Quadrilla should be given permission to frack at Preston Road is really somewhat premature. Although the likelihood is that if it does get the go-ahead, that Quadrilla will continue to go along with their track record and mess it up, which of course might actually accelerate bringing this whole saga to an end. But we can't take that risk. We can't take that risk for all the people who live downwind of the Quadrilla well site. And of course the other determining factor here is perhaps the fact that Quadrilla have not got an emergency response plan, and the Lancashire Emergency Services have persistently and consistently refused to share any information regarding their emergency response plans in the event of a disaster unfolding at the Preston New Road well site, which I think we can take as a pretty surefire bet that they haven't got one in place. So we'll be examining that, as I'm sure others will, over the next few weeks. But anyway, meanwhile, it's going to be a short broadcast this morning, because I am going to be back in the studio in Plymouth tonight for an episode of Humanity versus Insanity, where my guest will be Mark Steele, and we'll be looking at the latest developments in this attempt to roll out 5G across the country next year. And as I've said now on numerous occasions, actually the threat of 5G, almost, I wouldn't say pushes fracking into insignificance, but fracking is targeting the rural areas, and 5G is initially going to target the inner city areas. Maybe this is why Theresa May feels it's probably quite appropriate to give the NHS a little bit of extra cash, at least for the time being, until such time as we know what the negative health impacts of these pernicious industries are going to be. And then I will be back with an episode of Fracking Nightmare tonight at 9 o'clock, and you can watch that either on my Facebook page or on the UK Column Live YouTube channel. So finally, thank you so much to all the people that have showed phenomenal support to our GoFundMe campaign to cover all the costs and expenses associated with challenging the quadrilla injunction. It is an enormous weight off of our minds, and my team have been working extremely hard this week, pulling together the bundles of evidence that we need to challenge this campaign. And you know, the witness statements are still coming in from all over the world, and you know, I think we have a very, very compelling case as to why this injunction should not be granted, and why it would be wholly appropriate for the courts to uphold the fundamental rights for freedom of assembly and freedom of expression. Because those people who are participating in challenging both the unconventional gas and the 5G industries are those who have the interests of future generations very much at the heart of their agenda, and not greed, pure out and out greed, which is the primary motivation for both of these industries. So thanks again for joining me today. I'm going to head back down into the valley where it's still green, and get out of this this wind, which has got quite a bite to it. Well, enjoy the longest day, and I will be back tomorrow morning at 8:30 with a relatively short broadcast, because I shall be heading back north to get back into the fray against the unconventional gas industry. So thanks again, and catch you tomorrow.